There was a time when you were the one reaching out first, the one double texting, the one checking if they had eaten, if they had reached home safely, if they were upset, if they still cared, and in that season you thought effort would secure love, you believed consistency would create clarity, and you assumed that the more you proved your value the more they would recognize it. But somewhere along the way you got tired, not because you stopped caring, but because you realized you were the only one carrying the emotional weight of something that was supposed to be shared, and so you did something they never expected. You stopped chasing, you stopped over-explaining, you stopped trying to decode mixed signals, you stopped shrinking yourself to fit into their comfort zone, and the moment you stepped back was the exact moment their confusion began because they were used to your pursuit, they were comfortable in your predictability. They relied on the fact that no matter how distant they became you would close the gap, no matter how cold they acted you would warm the space, no matter how long they disappeared you would still be there waiting with open arms, and when you broke that pattern you disrupted a dynamic they had grown dependent on without even realizing it, because sometimes people do not value the love that is constantly available, they value the love they fear losing. And when your energy shifted from chasing to choosing yourself, from proving to observing, from begging to building, it created silence where there used to be noise, and that silence started speaking louder than all your previous words ever did, because now they had to wonder, they had to question, they had to feel what you once felt, they had to sit with uncertainty instead of control, and confusion is uncomfortable for someone who is used to being emotionally catered to without effort. Confusion forces reflection, and reflection forces accountability, and accountability is something many people avoid until they are confronted with absence, and your absence, even if it is only energetic, became a mirror they could no longer ignore. You did not stop chasing to play a game, you stopped chasing because you discovered your worth is not something to negotiate, you realized that love should not feel like a performance review where you constantly try to meet unspoken expectations, and when you withdrew your overinvestment you did not lose power, you reclaimed it, because chasing often comes from fear, fear of abandonment, fear of replacement, fear of being misunderstood. But choosing peace over pursuit comes from strength, and strength is quiet, it does not announce itself, it simply stands still and allows others to reveal themselves, and when you stood still they began to move differently, they checked your social media more often, they reread old messages, they replayed conversations in their head, they noticed your absence in their routine, and suddenly the attention they once received without effort became something they had to earn, and earning something creates value, while receiving something effortlessly often creates complacency. Their confusion is not because you changed, it is because the dynamic changed, and dynamics are powerful because they shape behavior without either person consciously deciding on the rules, and for a long time the unspoken rule was that you would always be there, always understanding, always forgiving, always initiating, and when you removed yourself from that role they did not know how to respond. Because now the responsibility to maintain connection shifted onto them, and many people do not realize how much someone was carrying until they are asked to carry it themselves, and that is when awareness begins to grow, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, but growth rarely feels comfortable at first. You may wonder if they even notice, and the truth is they do, even if pride prevents them from admitting it, because human beings are deeply attuned to shifts in energy, especially when that energy once revolved around them, and when the validation they once relied on becomes scarce they feel the difference, they sense the space, and in that space questions begin to rise, questions like why did you stop? Who are you giving your attention to now? Are you moving on? Did you finally get tired? And those questions can stir emotions they had buried under convenience, because when someone stops chasing, it forces the other person to confront the possibility of loss, and loss clarifies what comfort once blurred. There is power in no longer overextending yourself. There is power in responding instead of reacting. There is power in letting someone meet you halfway instead of running the entire distance alone, and that power unsettles those who benefited from your imbalance, because imbalance is easy for the one receiving more than they give, but balance requires effort, and effort reveals true intention. And now that you are no longer compensating for their lack, their true level of interest becomes visible, and that visibility can either motivate them to rise or expose that they were never willing to meet you at your depth in the first place. When you chased, they felt secure without investing. When you stopped, they felt insecure without understanding why, and that insecurity is not your responsibility to fix, because your role was never to manage their comfort at the expense of your peace, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to step back and allow someone else to decide if they are willing to step forward, because love cannot be dragged. It must be chosen freely, and when you stop dragging the connection forward, you created space for truth to surface, and truth always reveals whether something is real or simply convenient. Their confusion may show up in subtle ways, like random check-ins, delayed but curious responses, sudden compliments, unexpected jealousy, or even silence filled with observation, and all of it stems from the same source. They are trying to understand the new version of you. The one who is no longer anxiously attached to outcome, the one who is focused on growth. The one who has discovered that self-respect is more attractive than self-sacrifice, and this version of you is unfamiliar to them because it cannot be controlled through inconsistency, it cannot be manipulated through distance, it cannot be secured through minimal effort, and that unfamiliarity creates tension because people are comfortable with patterns, even unhealthy ones, and you broke the pattern. You did not lose them by stopping the chase, you simply stopped losing yourself, and sometimes what feels like detachment is actually alignment, alignment with your standards, alignment with your emotional boundaries, alignment with the realization that you deserve reciprocity, and reciprocity is not about equal texting or perfect timing, it is about mutual desire. Mutual effort, mutual presence, and when that mutuality is absent no amount of chasing can manufacture it, it can only temporarily mask the imbalance, and you grew tired of masking what was clearly uneven. If they truly value you, your stillness will awaken something in them, not panic driven by ego but intention driven by clarity, and they will begin to show up in ways that are consistent rather than reactive, because confusion can either lead to ego battles or genuine reflection, and reflection can lead to change, but that journey belongs to them, not you. Your journey was to step back, to breathe, to reclaim your energy, to remember that love should feel like partnership not pursuit, and you have already taken that step. Now they are confused because they can no longer rely on your predictability, they can no longer assume your availability, they can no longer take your presence for granted, and confusion is often the first stage of realization that they may have underestimated you, realization that your patience had limits, realization that your silence carries more weight than your words ever did. And in that realization lies a choice for them: either rise to meet you or retreat into pride, and whichever path they choose will reveal more than anything they ever said while you were chasing. Stay steady in your decision, not out of stubbornness but out of self-respect, because the moment you stopped chasing was the moment you chose growth over fear, and growth always shifts dynamics, it always challenges comfort zones, it always exposes truth, and while they navigate their confusion, you continue building your peace, strengthening your boundaries, expanding your life beyond waiting. Because when you stop chasing what is uncertain, you create space for what is certain to find you. And sometimes the greatest move you can make is no move at all, because stillness has a way of separating those who truly value you from those who only valued your effort, and in that separation clarity replaces confusion, strength replaces anxiety, and self-worth replaces doubt. And no matter what they decide, you have already won something far more important: you have reclaimed yourself. And as time moves forward and you continue to remain still, grounded, and centered in your own growth, their confusion slowly begins to transform into curiosity, because what once felt like a temporary shift now feels permanent, and permanence changes everything. Because when someone believes you will eventually return to the old pattern, they can afford to wait, they can afford to test, they can afford to delay effort. But when they start to sense that this new version of you is not a phase but a decision, that is when curiosity turns into concern, and concern turns into urgency, and urgency reveals how deeply your presence was woven into their emotional routine. Because even people who struggle to express attachment still build silent dependencies, and you were a steady source of validation, reassurance, excitement, and emotional stability whether they acknowledged it or not. The silence you created was not empty, it was powerful, because silence removes distraction, and without distraction people are left alone with their thoughts, and thoughts have a way of amplifying what the ego tried to minimize. So now they think about the way you used to care, the way you used to show up without hesitation, the way you supported them even when they gave you half the energy in return. And memory becomes louder when access becomes limited, because humans often romanticize what they can no longer easily reach, and what once felt ordinary begins to feel rare, and rarity increases perceived value, and suddenly the attention they once received so effortlessly feels like something they should have protected more carefully. They may try subtle approaches first, a casual message that seems random but is carefully timed, a reaction to your story that feels playful but carries hidden intention, a compliment that sounds light but is loaded with testing energy, because they are trying to measure the distance, trying to understand how far you have moved emotionally, trying to see if the door is still slightly open, and your calm, balanced responses confuse them even more, because they are used to emotional intensity. From you, they are used to enthusiasm, they are used to immediate engagement, but now you respond with composure, you match energy instead of exceeding it, you invest only where there is reciprocity, and this emotional discipline unsettles them because it forces equality. When you were chasing, the power dynamic was tilted, not because you were weak but because you were overgiving, and overgiving can unintentionally create imbalance, and imbalance allows the other person to feel secure without growth. But now the dynamic has shifted toward neutrality, and neutrality feels unfamiliar to someone who benefited from your emotional generosity, and so they begin to question themselves. wondering if they miscalculated, wondering if they pushed too far, wondering if they assumed too much about your tolerance, and those questions chip away at complacency. There is also a deeper layer to their confusion, and that layer is ego, because ego struggles when it no longer feels prioritized, ego struggles when attention decreases, ego struggles when it senses it is no longer the center of someone's emotional world, and for a long time you revolved around them in ways that felt natural to you but empowering to them, and now that your focus has shifted toward your own goals, your own peace, your own evolution, they feel the difference even if they cannot articulate it, because attention is a form of energy, and when energy redirects it leaves a vacuum, and that vacuum is uncomfortable for anyone who grew accustomed to being fueled by it. But beyond ego there is also something more human, more vulnerable, and that is the realization of potential loss, because when someone senses they might truly lose access to you, not just temporarily but permanently, it awakens a deeper emotional response, and that response can range from regret to longing to determination, and sometimes even fear, because humans are wired to protect what feels meaningful once the risk of losing it becomes real, and your stillness made that risk visible. What makes this shift powerful is that you did not announce it, you did not threaten to leave, you did not create dramatic ultimatums, you simply adjust your behavior, and behavioral change speaks louder than emotional speeches, because words can be negotiated but patterns cannot be ignored, and when your pattern changed they had to adapt or be left behind, and adaptation requires effort, and effort reveals true priorities. You may notice that their energy begins to fluctuate, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, sometimes eager, sometimes guarded, and that inconsistency is not randomness, it is internal conflict playing out externally, because part of them wants to regain comfort while another part resists vulnerability, and vulnerability would require admitting that they relied on you more than they realized, that they underestimated your threshold, that they assumed your loyalty guaranteed permanence, and admitting those things requires humility. Meanwhile you are evolving, and evolution is attractive in ways chasing never was, because growth carries quiet confidence, growth radiates independence, growth signals abundance rather than scarcity, and abundance energy changes how others perceive you, because someone who is not desperate to hold on is someone who appears capable of walking away. And the possibility of you walking away is what amplifies their confusion the most, because now the narrative has shifted from you needing them to them potentially needing you. You might even sense moments where they attempt to reassert control, perhaps by delaying responses intentionally, perhaps by acting overly casual, perhaps by mentioning other options to provoke reaction, but your calm nonchalance disrupts those strategies, because you are no longer reacting from fear, you are responding from stability, and stability cannot be manipulated easily. And when manipulation fails, confusion deepens, because their previous methods of maintaining distance while keeping you attached no longer work. The truth is that when you stop chasing, you forced a reset, and resets are uncomfortable because they remove illusion, and illusions are comfortable because they allow people to avoid making definitive choices, and for a long time the illusion may have been that things were fine as long as you kept trying, but when you stopped trying, reality surfaced, and reality asks one simple question. Is this connection strong enough to sustain itself without one person carrying it entirely? And that question now sits in their mind whether they admit it or not. You are not responsible for resolving their confusion, you are not obligated to reassure them that you still care, you are not required to shrink your growth to make them feel secure, because true connection thrives in balance, not imbalance, and if they choose to rise, they will meet you with clarity, consistency, and intention, not confusion and half-effort, and if they choose not to rise, then your decision to stop chasing has already saved you from a cycle that would have drained you indefinitely. As you continue focusing on your own expansion, building your life, strengthening your boundaries, and nurturing your self-worth, you may notice that their confusion eventually transforms into one of two outcomes: either they step forward with genuine effort or they slowly fade into the background of your story, and both outcomes serve you, because both outcomes align you with truth. And truth is always better than uncertainty masked as hope. So remain steady, remain composed, remain anchored in the version of you that no longer seeks validation through pursuit, because the moment you stopped chasing you stepped into your power, and power does not beg, power does not overextend, power does not compete for attention, power simply exists, and in its existence it attracts what is aligned and repels what is not, and while they navigate their confusion, you continue walking forward, not to prove anything, not to trigger reaction, but because you finally understand that the right connection will never require you to abandon yourself just to keep someone else comfortable, and as even more time passes and you continue to move with quiet confidence rather than anxious urgency, something deeper begins to settle inside you, a realization that this was never about making them confused, it was about making yourself clear. Clear about your standards, clear about your emotional capacity, clear about what you will and will not tolerate, because clarity within always creates reaction outside, and when you became clear that you would no longer chase inconsistent energy, the universe of that connection had no choice but to reorganize itself around your new boundary, and boundaries are powerful not because they push people away but because they filter who is willing to step closer with intention. At first their confusion may have felt validating to you, because part of you wanted them to feel what you once felt, the uncertainty, the imbalance, the quiet anxiety of not knowing where you stood. But as you mature emotionally you begin to understand that this is not about revenge or ego, it is about alignment, and alignment feels peaceful, it does not require proving a point, it does not require dramatic reactions. It simply requires consistency with yourself, and the more consistent you become in honoring your worth, the less attached you feel to their response, whether that response is confusion, effort, or silence. There comes a moment when you realize that their confusion is actually a reflection of the gap between who you were and who you are becoming, because the version of you that chased was operating from hope mixed with fear, while the version of you that stands still operates from confidence mixed with discernment, and discernment changes everything. Because now you observe actions instead of fantasizing about potential. Now you value consistency over chemistry, now you prioritize peace over intensity, and those shifts elevate your standards in ways that make casual connection impossible, because you are no longer entertained by breadcrumbs when you know you deserve the whole meal. They may attempt one final push, a more direct conversation, a stronger display of interest, an emotional confession that feels different from before, and this is the true test not of them but of you, because when someone senses they are losing access, they sometimes increase effort temporarily, but temporary effort cannot sustain long-term alignment. And you have grown wise enough to recognize the difference between panic-driven attention and purpose-driven commitment, because panic is loud. but inconsistent, while purpose is calm and steady, and you are no longer impressed by intensity that fades once comfort returns. If they truly value you, their confusion will transform into clarity, and clarity will produce consistent action, not just words, not just promises, not just emotional bursts, but steady presence, accountability, and reciprocity, because real growth reveals itself in patterns, not moments, and if they rise to meet you, it will not feel forced, it will feel natural, it will feel balanced. It will feel like two people choosing each other rather than one person convincing the other, and that is the kind of connection that does not require chasing, because it moves forward through mutual desire. But if they do not rise, if their confusion turns into withdrawal or pride, if their ego prevents vulnerability, if they choose comfort over courage, then you will notice something surprising. You will not feel devastated the way you once feared you would, because your identity is no longer tied to their validation, your happiness is no longer dependent on their attention, your self-worth is no longer negotiated through their responses, and when you detach from outcome you gain emotional freedom, and emotional freedom is one of the most attractive energies a person can carry. You will start to see how much time you once spent analyzing their behavior, rereading messages, wondering what they meant, questioning your own reactions, and now that mental noise has quieted, and in that quiet you rediscover yourself, your passions, your ambitions, your friendships, your spiritual growth, your goals that were once postponed while you focused on maintaining a connection that was not equally maintained for you. And as your world expands beyond them, their role in your emotional life naturally shrinks, not out of bitterness but out of balance. There is something transformative about realizing you can walk away and still be whole, about understanding that love is not something you chase but something you allow, about trusting that what is meant for you will not require you to beg for consistency, and that trust radiates outward, and people feel it, including them, and when they feel that you are no longer afraid to lose them, they are forced to confront whether they are afraid to lose you. And that confrontation is where truth lives. The most powerful part of this entire shift is that you did not change who you are at your core. You are still caring, still loving, still capable of deep emotional connection, but now your love is guided by boundaries. Now your care is matched with discernment, now your effort is reserved for those who reciprocate, and that combination of warmth and strength creates a presence that cannot be taken for granted. Because it is no longer freely overextended, it is intentionally offered. As you stand in this new energy, you may even find that new opportunities begin to appear, new conversations, new admirers, new possibilities that reflect your upgraded self-worth, because when you stop chasing one person, you open space for what truly aligns with your growth, and sometimes the confusion of one person is simply the closing chapter of a connection that was meant to teach you your value, not test your endurance. And sometimes it becomes the beginning of something stronger because both people choose to rise, but either way you are no longer stuck in emotional limbo. In the end, this was never about making them confused, it was about breaking a cycle, it was about stepping out of a pattern where your love was abundant but your standards were negotiable, and now your standards are firm, your energy is protected, your presence is intentional, and whether they step forward or step away, you remain steady. Because you have learned that the right person will never require you to exhaust yourself just to feel chosen, the right person will not be confused by your stillness, they will be drawn to it, they will respect it, they will rise to meet it. So keep moving forward without chasing, keep loving without overextending, keep caring without compromising yourself, because the moment you stopped running after someone was the moment you started walking toward your highest self, and that journey is far more important than any temporary confusion left behind, and when you fully embrace that truth, you realize that you did not lose control, you gained clarity. You did not create chaos, you created balance, and in that balance lies the kind of peace that no external validation can ever replace.